Welcome again. My name is Christa Eidsness. I'm the head of the Conservatory, and Chris Jones is with us today to talk about his life as the principal bass player for the Regina Symphony Orchestra and how he got there and those kinds of things. Part of our tradition at the University of Regina is to acknowledge that we are not the first people to ever make music on this land. And so we are situated on the territories of the Nehiyawak, Anishinaabeg, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. The University of Regina is on Treaty 4 territory with a presence also in Treaty 6. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon. Appreciate your presence and look forward to having this conversation with Chris. So Chris, as we get started, I am going to ask, first thing is, so what's on your playlist? What do you listen to? I know you make a lot of music, but what do you listen to?
That's a really good question. I think, as someone who predominantly plays classical music, maybe it would be sort of a shock to some to know that I predominantly don't listen to classical music for fun. I mean, I definitely love, Beethoven, Mahler, Strauss, Stravinsky, all of those great composers. But I think what's on my playlist would probably be more characterized by like weird jazz and stuff like that. Like I love groups like Wolfpack. I love singers and songwriters like Theo Katzman, stuff like that. There's a really great group called Busty and the Bass that I listen to. So a lot of like funk, jazzy sort of weird stuff, Snarky Puppy. But I think also lately, just living here in Saskatchewan, I never really thought I'd say this, but I've been kind of bit by like the country, like folk music bug a little bit. Like I think if you live here long enough, it just kind of creeps its way in. So shout out to people like Wolf Willow, Casey and Clayton, like a lot of those groups, and a lot of those people are some of my friends too that I've been really privileged to make while living here, and they're all incredibly talented musicians. So a lot of that on my playlist right now.
That's awesome. And I will say, I asked the question because I think certainly young students who are immersed in learning, primarily classical music that we teach, often think, well, this is all I can listen to. So I love that you listen to other things than what you play. So that's great. That's why I asked the question. Yeah. So so for those of you that are listening and watching, I have sent Chris a list of the 11 questions I'm probably going to ask. I may not go in the exact order. So, but I will try and go in some kind of order, and I will ask, what does music mean to you? I talk about students being immersed in music. You are clearly immersed in music because this is what you do all the time, right? So what does music mean to you?
Oof. That's a really heavy question. I mean, it's, I think music is very personal to everybody, so that's also a great question because you're probably going to get a very different answer and a different meaning for a lot of people. And it's a complex one for me, but what I think came to mind immediately and most naturally when you asked that was it's communication for me. Like it's I always felt like music to me was a way to kind of explain and feel and just create these feelings and emotions that sometimes, a lot of people can create with words, but otherwise it's just this sort of thing that we hear and we can't see and we can't grab, but we can feel it somehow, So I've always been really drawn to that sort of mystical, magical quality to music that you can like put on a song and it can like really make you feel something, and you can be anywhere and no one else, if you have your headphones and no one else can really know that that's happening, but it can transform and take you into this like world, and I think that was definitely what really, I think, drew me into music, was just the imaginative world that a song or a piece or anything can take you to. And I know for myself that I never really felt like I was great with words. So here we are in an interview. But when I was playing music, I felt like, oh, like this just finally feels sort of natural to me, you know, like I can finally um, say the things I want to say and feel like I'm doing something clearly. Sometimes, not all the time, but you know, I can sort of feel like myself when I'm up here playing. And I feel the same way when I'm listening to music. And I think that to me, like my favorite music out there, like musicians are the ones that I can listen to and I can like feel what they're trying to tell me, you know. And sometimes it's your own interpretation too, but yeah, I would say for me music is about the communication and the feeling, and that can go so far, but I think that's kind of what I'd boil it down to. Yeah.
That makes total sense. And I really appreciate that you talk about that mystical and the feeling side of music, because you're like, everybody communicates in different ways, right? And so some people are not going to respond, even though lots of people communicate with words and can evoke feelings with words. Not everybody's going to respond to those feelings in the words. And so that's a good way of explaining it. Yeah, I appreciate that. So
Yeah.
how did you get started playing the bass? That's my big question for today. How did you get started with this? Yeah.
Okay. Well, some people may know, but most probably don't know this about me, that I actually, the bass was not my first instrument technically. I always loved music as a kid. And I think I wanted to just be some sort of like crazy next rock star guitar player when I was a child. Like I think I was probably around 10 or 11 years old, and I was listening to like rock and roll music and like stuff like that. And everyone um, around me would tell me, oh, like don't listen to the music too loud, you know. But I would just be like in my room with my little stereo next to my head on the bed, like listening to my favorite CDs and like rocking my head on the pillow. And I would just like imagine myself holding a guitar and was like, oh, I'm gonna make this happen. So my parents got me a guitar and I started playing this thing. And I just, for whatever reason, I guess like maybe I just had large hands or something for a kid, but every time I would try to play chords on the guitar, the strings would just buzz all the time. And it just wasn't really working. And I think that's actually a pretty normal thing to happen for most people when they start. And I think if I would have just like powered through, maybe I would have been fine. But it didn't really sit right with me for some reason. I still loved it, but it was just never really working. And I think one day someone at like a guitar or music store or something was like, oh, well, maybe you should try the bass. Like, you know, just it's got bigger strings and they're more spaced out. And I like picked up this bass and I thought, oh wow, this actually feels really great. And lucky for me, as time went on, I noticed, oh wow, the bass actually has like less notes than all the other instruments do. And it's just like way easier and it's slower and it like kind of sounds cool, but that's kind of the joke I like to make. But yeah, it just kind of felt like a natural fit. And I made my way through like middle school and high school in a like kind of traditional music program. I was really, really lucky to go to a really, really great arts music high school called Cawthra Park Secondary School in
Yeah.
Mississauga, Ontario. So
I've
shout
been
out
there.
to,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, really? Have you?
I went to Mayfield in
Oh, no way.
yeah.
Oh, okay. So you know all about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to all those folks there. I mean,
Yeah.
that was a really like transformative place and like pivotal place for my musical life, I think. And so I went there and they had some double basses just kind of like looming in the corner of the band room. And I remember being like, oh, what are those? Like those look huge, those look cool. Like, and I think my music teachers were kind of saying, oh, well, you know, we usually start like you on those when you're in grade 11, but you can kind of play around with one for now. And that was it. Like I just grabbed one and I would just be in the practice rooms playing it by myself every day. I think eventually I knew that I liked it enough that I wanted to find a teacher, and I was really, really lucky to find my teacher, Corky, if you're listening to this, I guess. Thank you. And she really, I mean, I can't really, I think, you know, when you like watch those TV shows and there's like that moment that like changes everything. And as a viewer, you can see that if that didn't happen, that
Yeah.
would have been like the end. Like I didn't know it at the time, but that was it. Like her reaching out to me and being like, you need to take lessons if you want to do this. And then me going for it was really kind of the moment. I don't think I'd be here today sitting in front of you if it weren't for her. So
Wow.
I think the rest is history, but yeah, that's more or less how I got started with the double bass.
Awesome. But you started with electric bass, it sounds like. Is that
I
right?
did,
You
yes.
did.
Yeah.
Wow. Because
Mhm.
I've heard the theory, because I know we have a cello teacher with us today. I've heard the
Haha.
theory that you should take like some cello students would be willing to maybe progress to double bass, but I hadn't thought about going from electric bass to double bass. So that's interesting.
Yeah, you know, it's there are actually quite a few of us, quite a few double bass players that started on electric bass, like played electric bass when they were younger and loved all the like rock bands, the Red Hot Chili Peppers and the whatnots, and switched over to double bass later. Like that's not a really uncommon thing, and I think it's
Wow.
just because the double bass is so large, you know, and most parents like they look at instruments for their like young child who is still growing.
Yeah.
They're like half-sized humans, and they look at this double bass and they're like, no, like it's just
Well,
not.
I had an image of you as like a 10-year-old with this massive double bass on your back. I'm like, how do you do that? So
I know. I think a lot of people, yeah, a lot of people just kind of bypass that, you know, parents and stuff, they're like, no way. Like
yeah.
it's twice the size of my child. But yeah, you know, I do have some students that I've taught students in that started on cello and switched to bass when they were kind of a bit more grown up. And
Yeah.
I've had students that played electric bass and try double bass later. And I've had ones that just start right away with the
Right with
bass at a
double
young
bass.
age too. And they play little half-sized basses that are like kind of like bloated cellos a little bit. Like they just look slightly larger and looks a little awkward. And when I play on it, it feels like it's a little toy, but you know, it's yeah, it there's something for everyone, I think. But yeah, we all have kind of those weird journeys, and it's definitely not the same as most instrumentalists when they start when they're I don't know 5 or 6 years old
Yeah.
on a baby violin. That's a little more rare for double bass, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I definitely see that, especially as a parent. So you told us a little bit. So you were at Cawthron Park, which is a performing arts school. What did you do after high school?
After high school, I was really very privileged to be able to go to the Manhattan School of Music in
Okay.
New York City, and I did my Bachelor of Music there and spent 4 years studying with Jeremy McCoy. Jeremy, if you're here, thank you. And that was an incredible 4 years. I have like, you know, it's just one of those times in my life that I will never forget. And I learned so much there and still kind of carry that feeling with me forever. I did my 4 years there. And when I finished up, I was kind of at a crossroads because I think a lot of people go that want to play, you know, they go into like a master's degree or something like that and continue that after their undergrad. But I sort of had this feeling, at least when I finished my undergrad, that I didn't want to do more school. I just wanted to play somewhere, you know, and um, I decided to go back to Toronto and freelance for a year. And while I was doing that, I was living with my parents at home and was practicing a lot and looking at auditions. And funny enough, one day I see this little thing for Regina Symphony principal bass, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like something I would probably really definitely should 100% go for. I don't know, I just had like a feeling, you know, sometimes I just have a gut feeling when things like that come up that I just need to do it. And I practiced really, really hard and worked really, really hard and flew out here on a sunny spring, I guess. Spring. I mean, we don't really have spring here, but afternoon, and played the audition and was really lucky enough to end up coming here and becoming the principal bass.
So had you ever been to Regina before?
No. I think when I saw the name Regina Symphony, I knew, like, I was like trying to brush up my memory from grade school when we had to like fill out all the provinces and the capitals, and I was like, where is that again? Is that like over there? Like, I don't think I was like 100% certain I remembered where it was on the map. So and then I kind of checked and was like, oh, it's in Saskatchewan. Okay. And then, but no, I had not been. I had never been to Saskatchewan or anywhere out here before, so it was a first for me. Didn't really have any expectations, but yeah.
Because how long have you been here now?
This this is my third season here,
Okay.
and I've lived here for just about 2.5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you've clearly survived the minus 50-degree weather that we've had over the last few weeks. So
I mean, just barely.
I think you can consider yourself a true Saskatchewanian now. Like, you survived the winter. It's good.
Oh, you know what? Like, I mean, things started for me in Toronto and they grew in New York. And now I'm like really lucky to kind of be able to call like Regina and Saskatchewan my home, and it really kind of feels that way now. It's pretty special. So the minus 50 just makes it, more unique, I guess, but it's the people and the community and just like the feeling of being here that keeps me warm. So
awesome.
yeah.
That's all. So tell us what a typical day kind of looks like for you as a musician? Like, what do you do during a day?
Yeah.
Like a work day. I don't need to, I mean, I'm sure you have lots of personal things that you do, but what does a work day look like for you?
Oh, well, okay. I mean, it's really different now because like I'm trying to remember the like pre-pandemic and like post-pandemic lifestyle, which I think are going to be totally different now. But if I'm gonna like try and find the middle ground, it's like, I mean, most work days for me have some kind of teaching, some kind of practicing, and some kind of rehearsal and or concert in the day. And in between that, I like to spend lots of time like moving my body. I like to exercise and go to the gym. I like to go for walks with my friends, play sports. Back in the time when that was a thing that you could do, we'd play squash and things like that, go swimming. Yeah. But yeah, a typical day, like I will teach some students. So right now that looks like this on Zoom or something like that. I'll practice. I like to always warm up my hands and just get everything kind of ready before I have any kind of rehearsal. So that will be like scales and technique and stuff like that, warm up routines. I mean, I have one that I like to do. It takes about an hour and a half, just to like really, really, get ready and feel good about what I have to do next. And then I go to rehearsal, which sometimes is in the morning, sometimes is in the evening. It kind of just depends on what we're doing and where we're playing and whatnot. But I'll have a rehearsal that'll usually be about 2 to 2.5 hours. And if not a rehearsal, it'll be a concert, and it'll, the day will look kind of the same for me. I'll do some practicing, eat some good food. That's a key one for me. I like to eat lots of food, so spend a lot of time. I budget a lot of time for that as well. But yeah, and play the concert, play the rehearsal, and then come home and fall asleep on the couch with my cat, I guess.
So just because I don't know, like I think we have mostly adults with us today, but I'm going to say this anyway, in case any of our students watch it later. Like I think students don't, at least I know when I was in high school, when I was in grade school, I didn't really have a good concept of what adults did during work. Like I had this and so I had this image of like, they go to work and they sit at a desk all day from 9 to 5 and then they come home. But you obviously don't work a 9 to 5 job. in the way, like your life is much more organic, kind of how it flows together. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible privilege. Like I have the flexibility to kind of decide what I want to do with my day. And in reality, we're only at work sometimes for, 3 to 5 hours at most, or other days, obviously, if you have a full day of teaching and then a rehearsal or, and you have meetings, it's crazier. But
Yeah.
for me, I'll often find days where I just maybe only have a couple students or only have a rehearsal, and I have the rest of the time to kind of choose to do what I want around that. But there is, I think, this expectation when you're a musician that you have to keep your level of playing up all the time. So that's like, and it's like brushing your teeth, it's something you kind of just have to do
Yeah.
every day. Otherwise, it kind of goes downhill pretty quickly, or it can kind of feel that way, And so it's a daily commitment of practicing and showing up. And that's a lot of like discipline that I kind of have for myself, but it's definitely a huge privilege to be able to kind of choose when I want to do that in a day. Yeah.
You have a warm-up that lasts for an hour and a half. Is that what you said?
Yeah, I guess it's sort of a warm-up. Yeah, warm-up, like scale routine, like just sort of like that's kind of like my workout, I guess, like a thing that kind of keeps my chops and stuff like, yeah, in shape, I guess. Yeah.
And then how much, so just thinking about like how much beyond the warm-up, even if it's not the hour and a half one, how much do you practice in a day? Like and I know time is always like when I was teaching students, it's like, I don't really want you to practice for like 40 minutes. That's not what this is about. I would tell them like, I want you to practice for maybe 3 times on this piece, like play it well 3 times. But so I know time's not always the most useful thing in terms of how much you practice, but like, do you spend hours a day practicing, or how do you balance that?
Well, I mean, it's I have always been like in recent years anyways, a really like firm believer that like 1 hour of really focused practice is better than like 3 to 4 hours of just kind of, on and off your phone, like just not really there thinking about what's for lunch, like, just so I think on a good day I can get like outside of my scale stuff, I can, on a good day I can get my practicing done in 1 to 2 hours, and on a bad day it'll be like 3 to 4 hours because I'm just so unfocused, and it's taking me so long to get through all the stuff, the repertoire that I need to learn or whatever it is that I want to work on. So
and I've heard that because of the pandemic, as you said, because of the pandemic, life is very different, right? And so I've heard that once you're allowed to go back as the RSO to play, I hear you're going to try and cram a whole lot of things into a very short period of time. so how, like, that means a lot of learning. Like, you don't know all of the music ahead of time. Like, it's like when they pick the repertoire for the year, then you have to learn new music for that year. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's every time we talk about a new season, I always look at the pieces that we have, and I try and identify ones that I know. Like, first of all, if there are any solos in any of them, then it's okay. I know that I have to play this solo this season. And then any of them that have like really big, like kind of audition excerpt or like just really prominent, bass parts that I know are really difficult and I'll want to like practice kind of ahead of time. So, if we're doing Beethoven 9, for example, that has a really, really, really giant bass part in it. And I know that, okay, I'm not just going to wait a week or two before that concert to start looking at it and just kind of like, I might start working on that stuff a month in advance, and then there are other programs that are like, you're right, totally new to me. And I'll get the music usually at least 2 weeks, or if not more, before that concert. And I'll spend some time in the day just listening and following along with the score and trying to identify if there are like really, really, challenging parts that I need to start practicing ahead of time. And I kind of just try and get that sound in my head. But when we have stuff that's back to back like that, yeah, sometimes you're thinking about music that's, you're not necessarily rehearsing that week, but it's like 2 or 3 weeks from now at the same time that you're practicing stuff for this week and maybe even the week next week. So that's when it kind of becomes like an organization thing, I think. But yeah, it's a challenging plan, but I'm also really excited that we might be able to do that. I think it's been really hard not to be able to do live music very much in the last year.
Yeah.
And we were certainly like very, very blessed to have, I think it was like almost like 8 or 9 weeks of concerts kind of in and out before we got shut down again. But if we're able to do any sort of version of that plan and bring all this live music back, that would be just so, so exciting. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so I know you'd said earlier, kind of talked about what music means to you in terms of that kind of communication piece, but I'm wondering what made, like, did you ever think of any other career paths, or was this just kind of instinct that drove you to be a musician? Like, how did you end up as a full-time musician?
Oh, well, I think I had a very clear idea when I was in high school at Cotter Park, that I wanted to do music. Like, it would just, in my mind, I just kind of focused on one thing. And I remember we would go to all those like career day things, or we'd have these assemblies where they'd be thinking like, oh, like, so think about what university program you want to go to, and I was always just kind of sitting there like with my arms crossed, like, oh, I already know, like, it's just music. I need to practice, I need to apply to this school, okay, we're done here, like. So I was pretty focused on that, but I definitely had times where I thought like, oh, if I didn't do music, like, what would I do? If I just, out of curiosity, if I were to just drop this whole thing, drop the bass and move on to something else, like, what would it be? And like, a bunch of random things have popped up in my mind. Sometimes I imagine myself being like doing some kind of like media, or like television or like radio host sort of thing. Like, I just thought that would be kind of a cool, it's still sort of performative, like, and I'd be using my voice, but I wouldn't necessarily be doing like singing or anything, So I've thought about that. Sometimes I thought like, oh, I could have done like, maybe I've been like a firefighter or something where it's like, I don't know. I think I always kind of like to glorify the like being like a hero sort of thing. But then I would actually look at, the lifestyle of a firefighter, and I think like, oh, maybe that's not for me. But yeah, I think all of those things were all sort of up in the air. They were all little possibilities, but when I really thought about what I actually wanted to do, and like what I really hoped to do, it was always music, and like every time I'd go to bed, I'd be lying in bed at night and I'd just be dreaming about like playing in an orchestra someday. That was always like the thing that I just wanted so, so, so badly. And now I wake up every morning and I'm lying in bed and I'm like, oh my God, like, this is what I'm doing, like, I'm actually here now playing in an orchestra. I don't have to dream about it anymore. So it's like, even to this day, and just talking about it now, I get little feelings sometimes, about just how lucky and special that is that I get to do that. So I can't really imagine myself doing anything else.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. Okay, so what you imagined when you were a teenager, are there things that you wish you had known to learn? Like, when you look back, like as a teenager, you go, I'm going to go and play in an orchestra. And now that you're playing in an orchestra, are there things you wish you had known about playing in an orchestra when you were younger that you would like to tell your younger self to get prepared for?
Ooh, that's a good question. I wonder, like, I think what's really stuck out to me the most about playing in an orchestra here is, and that I've learned the most from, is to listen to what people around you are doing. And I think that that's one of the biggest keys, I think, to just making great music, is to really open up what's happening here, around you, and use these more when you're playing. And I know as a student, I used to, just be so focused on my own playing because I would, want to make sure everything was in tune and I was doing all the right things that my teacher wanted me to do. And I just you kind of get so focused on your own thing, and it took me probably a few years after school to kind of realize, oh, it's not just what you're doing. You really have to pay attention to what everyone else is doing around you. Like the answers are there, to all the questions that you're thinking, like how long do I play this note? What style do I do this and that? Well, listen to the experts that are around you, and
Oh, interesting.
I'm really privileged. I feel like I've been saying this a lot, but I'm really privileged to play with some incredible musicians that have been doing this for a very long time at an extremely high level. And um, I learn something new every time I play with my colleagues, and I've just I've learned to open my ears up and listen to what they're doing and find the answers to the questions that I've had for so long in their playing. And I think if I would be able to go back to myself as a student and be like, one thing that's going to help you just that little extra bit, like accelerate you a little more, is don't overthink your own stuff, and just listen to what's happening around you, because you're going to find all the answers there, and you're going to just make better music that way, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay, so clearly basses, I knew this, but I'm going to say it anyway. So because bass is not often a solo instrument, is that right? Like basses tend to play with other instruments.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I say that because like I grew up as a pianist, and so as a pianist, it's really easy to play by yourself forever. Like you don't have to listen to
Mhm.
anybody else if you don't want to,
Mhm.
because you can create all the music you want in your own living room, kind of thing, right? And so
Mhm.
it's interesting just to hear the different perspective, because I hadn't thought of that. That's interesting, to listen to the people around you to learn at the same time. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think everyone has like, you can listen to anyone and just like find something that they're really good at that you can learn from. And I just think that like if you can, you steal all those little good parts about everyone that you come across and you just put it on like a little shelf behind you, and you just save it for another time. You never know when you'll need it, but everyone has little nuggets of gold, I think, so
Yeah.
definitely. And as a bass, we're a supporting instrument, and I really do think that our job is to make other people sound good. So if we're not listening to them, it's like you're gonna kind of miss that goal. You're gonna miss that target if you're
Yeah.
just absorbed with what you're doing. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so beyond the music, what do you know now about being a full-time musician? Like, are there other skills that now that you are doing this, you've been doing this for 2.5, 3 years, that's with the Regina Symphony. What other skills did you need to learn beyond music to make you the musician that you are today? So are there other things you've had to learn or that you wish you had learned before you ever got to Regina to make life just a little bit easier for yourself?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think being good at your instrument and being talented are, that's just like one very small part of the puzzle, I think. And I think any successful musician will tell you that sometimes in the music world, in the professional music world, it's not necessarily about how good you are as much as it is like how likable you are, and I think it's true. Like I think you need to be a kind of person that you can, get along with others and be professional and, you know, uh, be there and be like the kind of person that someone enjoys being with and working with, because at the end of the day, like, I mean, you sometimes you can be really, really good and not necessarily the nicest person and still succeed, but a lot of the time, there's just too much competition. And if there's someone who's a little less good than you and is like a much nicer person, like they might get hired more than you will, and you might succeed and have a more fulfilling career if you're sort of a good person. So I honestly think like, and this is kind of like, I mean, I'm not here to give life lessons, but I really do think kindness kind of at the top for me, and especially in music. Um, Professionalism is a big one too, like being prepared and coming to your rehearsals on time, and uh, being able to listen to what others are saying and doing, and being open to new ideas. I think that's another big one too. Sometimes you're going to be in a situation where you think something really, really well, and someone is going to present you with a different take. Maybe it's a piece that you've done and you wanted it to sound a certain way or go at a certain tempo and have a different feel, but someone else will give you an alternate way to do it, and you just have to kind of be open to that as well. Yeah, I don't know, I think these are all kind of little things, but it's you kind of have to have a bit of a drive too. I think that's maybe the last one. You have to really want it, and you have to work really hard and do all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have that drive, like if it's not something that you really, really want to do, it's going to be very difficult because you have to work so hard. And sometimes there are going to be times where you are too tired, or you want to do something else. There's something else in your life that is more exciting, but you still have to do it. So I don't know, I think these are all little things that I've kind of noticed that are maybe a little bit separate from just being talented and strong on your instrument, but they're all little skills that are super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're right though. Like the drive question is really, I mean, that's really, I think that's one of the keys. I would agree with that. And I'm just thinking back, like, because we've been thinking about how do we help our students move forward, and what do they do? And like, I think back to when I was in high school and thinking, oh, I'd really like to be, on Broadway. I don't have the personality for that. I now know that. I didn't know it then, but now having met professional musicians, I would never have made it past the front door, quite honestly. I can buy a ticket, but that's as far as I would get. I totally don't have the personality. So, but I think drive is part of that. And like really, really, and what I've heard for you say a little bit is you've had the drive, but you also have that kind of sense of this is what I have to do, right? Because you talked about your instinct in I should apply to be the principal bass in Regina. Like, of course I should do that, right? Like that instinct,
Yeah.
that's what drives you to do that. So that's an interesting piece in the puzzle of how you become that musician. Okay, I have two more questions and then we'll open it up to the floor. So
Sure.
one is, or actually I may have, I have two questions for sure. Okay, one is, do you have a favorite piece that you've played that you really enjoyed?
Ooh, that's a good one. I have so many. I might try and think of one that I've done here, and then I'll just think of like a general one. I think maybe my favorite piece that I've played here was my concerto that I did with the Regina Symphony in my second season. It was just about over a year, maybe a year and a half ago now. It was called Dark with Excessive Bright by Missy Mazzoli. And it was a brand new, just commissioned double bass concerto, and it had never been performed in Canada, and I don't think in the US either. So we were kind of like the US Canada premiere, which I thought was really exciting. And it was just like my first chance at playing a concerto with an orchestra. And it was just so much fun and such an incredible opportunity. And like, I think a kind of a huge leap of faith for the RSO to, give me this opportunity as well so early in my tenure here. And I was just so grateful and so excited for that. So, and then if there was just another piece that I've had so much fun playing in orchestra, I've had the chance of playing this one a couple times, and it's Ein Heldenleben by Richard Strauss. Any of the Strauss tone poems, like they just have, incredible bass parts and really, really difficult parts for just about any instrument in the orchestra, I think. And I had the really great opportunity to play that when I was in Manhattan School, and once again with the National Youth Orchestra of Canada. And it's just such a fun piece, and there are so many really big moments in it, and I've had so much fun playing it. So Yeah,
Awesome. Okay. And final question for me. Anything
sure.
else you want to tell us about who you are and what you do and how you got to where you are that we
Oh,
haven't already covered? There's so much, right? I know.
I know. You know what? Like, when I go back and think about my my life and music, it's the people. Like, I kind of forget about all the hours I've spent in the practice room by myself, and I remember mostly the people who have helped me and been there for support along the way. So, my parents, my family, my all of my amazing teachers, and the friends and colleagues that I've had the great fortune of meeting and doing and playing with along and learning from along the way. So I think that that's really been the most special part about music for me, is just kind of the love that
Mm.
has come from it and that I felt. I remember like my parents driving me to all over the place for youth orchestra, for lessons, and just everything, like back and to from school every other day. And I remember my teachers like giving me these really, really long lessons, going sometimes an hour over, the time, to really make sure I got something, and calling me before auditions and stuff to make sure that I'm in the right mindset. And, I remember my friends that I had so much fun playing just music with at home, or at gigs and stuff too, but just like kind of having fun making music together. And like, that's just kind of the stuff that warms my heart. And I think I remember the most about music is just sort of the love that came from it. So yeah, I'm really blessed. Yeah.
And I want to say thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing with us and talking about all this. This has been awesome. I'm going to stop
Oh,
the recording